Look at me talking about a film that came out 2 years ago on a YouTube channel that hasn't posted in like 10 months. What a guy. Anyway, today we are going to talk about Now, I'm your textbook garden variety weeb. I'm talking anime tattoos, owned a Naruto headband, and I've bought several swords at Comic-Con in my time. But there was always one thing that had me feeling really disconnected from the greater anime community, if you will. And that was, I wasn't really the biggest fan of Studio Ghibli. Okay, look, I just didn't grow up with it. I was more of a Pokemon and Digimon movie kid, and I have zero regrets there. Studio Ghibli was something I was always aware of, but never quite got to see. Then as I got older, I had seen other incredible anime movies by directors such as Makoto Shinkai and Mamoru Hosoda, who had similar vibes in their stories, but were told in very different ways. So by the time I watched Spirited Away for the first time in 2019, it just felt very dated, I guess. Now look, I understand it predates a lot of the movies I've seen and literally laid the groundwork for like hundreds of other stories, but I don't know, it just didn't hit the way I thought it would. And this trend continued as every Ghibli movie I saw afterwards was really cute and fun, but for some reason I just didn't really connect as deeply as some other people did to these stories. Now, let's cut to The Boy and the Heron. I went to see this movie on its theatrical re-release last year with my girlfriend and her family, and I firmly believe this is as close to a modern fairy tale that I've ever seen. In this movie, we follow the main character, Mahito. The story takes place around the time of World War II after his mother died in a hospital fire. Him and his dad moved to live with Mahito's new stepmom, who also happens to be his mom's sister? Yeah, so his dad kind of married his sister-in-law, and got her pregnant, which means now this woman is carrying Mahito's brother, cousin? It was a different time, I guess. But now Mahito lives in a new area surrounded by new family, and, well, he doesn't quite fit in. And of course, he's still kind of sad about the whole dead mom thing. But as the story continues, we see this place isn't exactly normal. A tower right off the property seemingly calls to Mahito. Natsuko, the aunt-mother thing, tells him about how his great-granduncle made that tower and then proceeded to go crazy, to which Mahito thanks Natsuko for the tea and leaves. But something is definitely up with that tower, and we will get there, but first, Mahito must start his first day at school. Pulling up with his dad in the whip, blasting some 𝗵𝗏𝗏, he starts his first day with style. Having money and being the only one who doesn't have a chopped haircut, he draws quite a lot of attention from his peers, and let's just say the other kids don't really like him too much. After his little tussle, he decides to hit himself in the head with a rock? Okay, not sure why he did this really. There's a line later in the movie that tries to justify this moment, but honestly, it was really just a dumb play, dude. Anyway, after this moment, things start to get a little weird, and maybe it's because he's suffering a concussion due to the whole, hitting yourself in the head with a rod situation, but these movies kind of just tend to have magic, so who knows? But the heron that we've seen glimpses of begins talking to him. He starts beckoning Mahito to come to the tower. Side note, he's voiced by the Robert Pattinson, and honestly, he does an incredible job. Anyway, Mahito begins to become obsessed with hunting this heron as it keeps speaking about his dead mother. Mahito doesn't play that shit, so he creates the first ever bow with a switch and gets ready to hunt. He does, however, notice Natsuko going into the woods, but hey, that can't interrupt this montage right now, so we'll deal with that later. I really enjoyed this little part of the movie because it kind of reminded me of like a child making an adventure and then living it out. He's just kind of doing things, preparing like he's gonna go on this really world-changing adventure when, in all honesty, he's just gonna go play in his backyard, but things do get pretty serious pretty fast. With Natsuko missing, Mahito realizes that he needs to go to the tower to go save her, and he ends up taking old lady Kiriko with him. I didn't mention this before, but there are these old ladies that are in the movie, and they are very reminiscent of characters like the Seven Dwarves, and no, I don't just mean that because they're small and little and act funny, although, yeah, no, that's exactly why they remind me of them. Anyway, from this point on, the story becomes a lot less linear and a little more obtuse. You see, I said this movie is a modern fairy tale, and that's because I truly believe that this is Studio Ghibli's very own adaptation of Alice in Wonderland. Now look, don't get it twisted, it doesn't really say the same thing that story does, and the characters don't really have much overlap, but the world itself is very reminiscent of Wonderland. So many rules and creatures and ways of life. Even how 𝗵𝗍 gets to the world is chasing an animal, except instead of a white rabbit, it's a gray heron. This story, however, is one about death. The world 𝗵𝗍 goes to isn't Wonderland, but rather a world created linking the dead and the living. Even at the start, when 𝗵𝗍 and Kiriko approach the tower, we see some Italian written on the entrance. 𝗙𝗍𝗍𝗍 la divina potestate. Jesus, I butchered that, and I'm Italian, by the way. Which is a phrase that is translated to divine power made me. Shout out Google. But upon further investigation, I learned this comes from the book Dante's Inferno. This saying is what's written at the entrance of hell itself. Now, this could mean nothing, but given the fact that this story is so covered in death, it really sheds a light on what Miyazaki was trying to do here. Now look, this story is still very Studio Ghibli-esque, whimsical characters, great animation, and super confusing at times, but this one, more than others, really leans into the metaphorical nature of the writing, I feel. Okay, spoiler alert for anyone who doesn't want to know the ending. You can click to this time here, or, stay and listen to the spoiler. I don't think it's that serious, but you do you. We basically learn that this world was created by his great-granduncle with power from a meteor that crashed to Earth years ago. Okay. He builds this world by placing these stones every 3 days, but he's getting a little old and his tower is crumbling. He asks 𝗵𝗍 if he could be his successor, as it needs to be someone from his bloodline. However, 𝗵𝗍 explains that he's corrupted, which is the excuse he used for why he hit himself with a rock. Okay. But as he says he's corrupted, he mentions that he cannot create a world that is a perfect paradise due to his corruption. The world ends up getting destroyed by other means, and 𝗵𝗍 and his stepmom get to go home. Not before he gets to meet a younger version of his mother who also got lost in the tower at a young age. Yeah, that's right, this story covers death, the afterlife, and time travel shenanigans. Anyway, they all end up back in their own world in their own time, and it's happily ever after. And look, there's a bunch of parakeets. So yeah, the movie can be a bit hard to follow, and maybe it's not the best Studio Ghibli movie to recommend, but what I will say is that its world building as well as its mystery created a feeling in me that reminded me of being a kid. Seeing a world that didn't make much sense, but trying to push on best you can as you learn how things work, or even how it feels to miss a loved one. This story just understands the feeling and portrays it in what I feel is a perfect way. If you haven't given this movie a chance, I think you should watch it, even if I may have spoiled it. Honestly, it's probably better going in with some knowledge beforehand anyway. Moving on though, I've said my piece about it. Have you guys watched the movie? What did you think about it? Do you have a movie you'd like me to watch and cover? Let me know in the comment section below. Thank you guys so much for watching. Love you all, and until next time, goodbye.